They don't miss you. Not really. They miss the version of you that still believed they'd come around. They miss the version that waited for their messages, that softened their silence, that forgave the distance before they even explained it. They miss the version of you who made it easy for them to stay avoidant while still feeling loved. And when that version disappears, when you finally begin to need them less, that's when the panic sets in. That's when they start to miss you, but not the real you, the one who's finally learned self-respect. They miss the reflection that made them feel in control of connection. Avoidants live in a world of quiet control. They build safety not through closeness, but through predictability. As long as they can predict how much you'll give, how much you'll tolerate, how far they can pull away without losing you, they feel safe. You become the constant in their emotional equation. They withdraw. You reach out. They distance. You chase. They criticize. You try harder. This rhythm, as painful as it is for you, feels like order to them. It keeps them from confronting the part of themselves that fears dependency, the part that equates love with being trapped. But one day, that rhythm breaks. You stop chasing. You stop explaining yourself to someone who never listens. You stop apologizing for simply wanting to feel close. And for the first time, the avoidant feels something they've spent their life running from: uncertainty. Because when you were predictable, they could safely ignore you. They knew you'd still be there. But now, they can't quite read you. You don't text right away. Your tone shifts from pleading to peaceful. You start to sound like someone who no longer revolves around their mood swings. And that unnerves them. They can sense the energy change long before they can name it. You're still kind, still respectful, but detached in a way they can't manipulate. You no longer feed their ego by making them the center of your emotional world. You're no longer waiting for their crumbs. And that's when the avoidance missing begins. Not because they've suddenly realized how deeply they care, but because the emotional ecosystem they relied on, the one where your needs sustain their power, has started to collapse. To the avoidant, closeness once felt like danger. Now, your distance feels like loss. And they don't know which one hurts more. They start to feel haunted, not by you, but by the absence of their reflection in your eyes. They used to see their worth and how much you needed them. Now that you no longer do, they're left facing the emptiness they've always been running from. And so they confuse that emptiness with love. They call it missing you. But what they're truly missing is the sense of power that came from being emotionally pursued. You were their safe mirror. You allowed them to feel valuable without having to be vulnerable. And when that mirror finally turns away, they're left staring into themselves. And they can't stand what they see. They start to remember you in flashes, not in moments of joy, but in the quiet spaces where they can't distract themselves. When they're driving, when they're brushing their teeth, when they wake up to silence that used to feel like freedom and now feels like consequence. They don't admit this to anyone, not even to themselves, because that would mean acknowledging that what they called peace was actually avoidance. They once convinced themselves that they didn't need you, that your love was too much, too demanding, too emotional, too something. But what they're realizing now is that what they called too much was actually life. It was warmth. It was connection. It was the pulse of being known. And when they pushed you away, they didn't push away chaos. They pushed away intimacy. They pushed away the one person who saw through their armor and still stayed. Now they scroll through old messages, not to reconnect, but to feel something familiar. They'll tell themselves they're just curious. But curiosity doesn't ache. Curiosity doesn't sting. Like realizing the last message was from you. and it went unanswered, they'll replay that moment over and over again, the one where you finally stopped reaching out. At the time, it felt like victory. Now it feels like silence too heavy to carry. They'll tell themselves they like being alone, but there's a difference between solitude and isolation. Solitude is chosen. Isolation is a consequence. And when the avoidance starts to feel that, when isolation no longer feels empowering, they begin to sense how much of their life has been built around running. They run when someone gets too close. They run when someone starts to understand them. They run when love becomes mirror instead of fantasy. Because real love requires them to sit still, to feel what they've been avoiding, to face the child inside, who was once shamed for needing too much. You see, they learned early on that needing others meant weakness, that showing emotion meant being unsafe. So they built their identity around being untouched, around being the one who leaves first. It wasn't malice, it was defense. It was the only language they were ever taught about how to survive connection. So when they met you, someone who felt deeply, someone who didn't hide their need, someone who could love openly, it terrified them, not because you did anything wrong, but because you represented everything they never gave themselves permission to feel. You became the embodiment of what they had buried, the longing, the warmth, the desire to be understood. And while part of them wanted it desperately, the other part was still ruled by fear. Fear that love would consume them. Fear that closeness would mean losing control. Fear that if they let you in, you'd see the fragile version of them they worked so hard to bury. So they pushed. They withdrew. They made you feel like your love was too much, like you were always reaching for something that didn't want to be held. But underneath that distance wasn't disgust, it was grief, because they knew you were offering something real, and they weren't ready to meet it. So they convinced themselves that pulling away was strength, that being cold was protection, that detachment was control. But control has a cost, and that cost is always connection. They lost not just you, but the version of themselves that felt safe enough to love. And when you began to heal, when you stopped waiting, something inside them shifted. They started to feel powerless, because for the first time, their silence didn't pull you back. Their absence didn't make you chase. Their detachment didn't make you beg. It made you free. And that's the part they can't handle. That's the part that haunts them. Because now, they're realizing that all along, you weren't the one who was too much. They were the one who was too afraid. Afraid to be seen. Afraid to be chosen. Afraid to stay. And now, as they sit in the stillness they once called comfort, they start to realize that distance doesn't heal fear. It feeds it. They thought love would trap them, but it's their avoidance that became the cage. And so they start to miss you. Not the current you, the one who learned to walk away, but the version who still gave without measure, the version who filled the silence with softness, the one who carried their emotional load because they couldn't carry their own. But that version of you no longer exists, and that's what terrifies them, because now, to have you back, they would have to do something they've never done before. They would have to show up. They would have to put their guard down, to communicate, to risk rejection, to be known. And that's the real reason they stay quiet even when they miss you. It's not pride, it's fear of being seen. Without the mask that protected them for so long, they think about reaching out. They type your name into their phone, but then they freeze. Because what would they say? Hey, I finally feel the thing you were begging me to feel years ago. They can't. They don't know how. Because in their world, love has always been a battlefield between longing and self-protection. So they scroll instead. They linger on your profile. They analyze your words. They notice your peace. And it hurts because your peace is proof that you can survive without them. And that realization is something their nervous system doesn't know how to digest. Avoidants are addicted to control. They need to feel that they can choose when and how connection happens. But when that control slips, when you take your power back, they spiral. They'll miss you, yes, but they'll also resent that they miss you. Because missing you means feeling powerless. And powerless is the one thing they've sworn never to be again. So they sit in their silence, telling themselves they're fine, that they don't need closure, that you've moved on. And that's for the best. But deep down, they replay the little things. Your laugh, your presence, the way you made ordinary moments feel like safety. They remember what it felt like to be emotionally seen and still accepted. And no matter how much they run, a part of them knows they won't find that again until they face themselves. You were never asking for too much. You were asking for honesty. You were asking for presence. You were asking for what real love demands. And the moment they finally miss you, they realize something tragic. They didn't lose you when you walked away. They lost you the moment they decided their comfort mattered more than connection. They start to notice it in strange moments. When the coffee doesn't taste the same. When they laugh, but it doesn't reach their eyes. When they scroll, but every distraction feels hollow. Something's shifting. The silence that once protected them has started to feel like punishment. They used to think numbness meant peace, that if they could keep the world at arm's length, they'd finally be safe. But safety without connection isn't peace. It's exile. And the body knows. It remembers what it's missing, even when the mind refuses to admit it. Their nervous system hums with unease. Because connection, even when it's frightening, is what we're wired for. So when they shut it down, their body starts to ache. Not physically, but in that invisible place where love used to land. They start remembering things they didn't let themselves feel before. Moments that seemed small, but were everything. The way you waited for them to open up. The softness in your tone when you said, "I'm not your enemy." The patience in your eyes when they couldn't meet your gaze. Back then, they mistook that patience for weakness. Now they see it for what it was. Strength. Because it takes strength to love someone who's constantly running. It takes strength to stay kind when someone keeps choosing distance over closeness. And that realization, it's unbearable because once they start to feel it, they can't unfeel it. Every time they try to suppress it, it rises again, louder, clearer, more painful. They tell themselves it's just nostalgia, that everyone misses someone sometimes. But this is different. This is deeper. It's not missing you because they're lonely. It's missing you because they realize you were the only one who ever met them emotionally. You were the first person who didn't fall for the performance, the charm, the independence, the story of "I don't need anyone." You saw through it, and that terrified them, because if you could see them, you could also leave. So they left first. But now that they're alone, they're realizing something cruel. They didn't escape abandonment. They recreated it. Every wall they built was supposed to keep pain out, but it also kept love out. It kept life out. It kept you out. And now, they're surrounded by the very emptiness they were trying to avoid. They start dreaming of you. Not the fights, not the chaos, just the small moments, the calm ones, the ones that felt like home. They wake up with that ache. That doesn't have words. Because how do you explain missing someone you pushed away? They scroll through your photos. They imagine what you're doing now. They see your smile. And it's different. It's lighter, freer, unafraid. And that hurts in a way. They can't admit to anyone. Because you were supposed to fall apart without them. You were supposed to stay the one who chased, who tried, who held the emotional weight for both of you. But you didn't. You learned to stand up, to stop begging for love. That didn't want to land, to stop trying to fix what you didn't break. And now, they're the ones staring at the door you once waited by. The roles have reversed. The chaser became the healed. The avoidant became the one haunted by connection. They think about reaching out. They imagine your voice, the way you'd say their name, like it meant something. But they hesitate because they know you're not waiting anymore. And this time, you wouldn't settle for crumbs. They'd have to give what they've always withheld: truth, vulnerability, consistency. And that's where the battle begins. Inside them, between the self that wants to be safe and the self that wants to be seen, between pride and longing, between control and surrender, they start to realize that the armor they built isn't strength anymore. It's isolation. They see that the life they called independent isn't freedom. It's fear wearing a disguise. And for the first time, they question everything. What if love was never the threat? What if the real threat was never letting it in? They remember the softness in your voice, the way you made space for them to be imperfect. And for a moment, their heart stirs. They want to believe that maybe they can love differently, that maybe they can try again. But healing for the avoidant doesn't happen in grand gestures. It happens in micro moments of courage. The first text they send and don't delete. The first emotion they name without shame. The first time they admit, I pushed away the one who wanted to stay. And that admission is where the healing begins. Because to heal, they have to grieve, not just losing you, but losing the version of themselves that didn't know how to love. They don't recognize the person in the mirror anymore. The one who used to feel powerful in distance now looks tired. Their eyes still hold the same calm, but it's not peace. It's restraint. It's someone who's learned to feel nothing, because feeling was once too dangerous. But now, the numbness isn't protection. It's grief, the kind that doesn't announce itself. It lives quietly in the pauses between distractions. It shows up when they put their phone down, when they try to sleep, when everything goes still. They thought silence was their sanctuary. Now it's where their ghosts live. The things they never said, the apologies they never voiced, the memories they tried to bury. All of it starts to surface, slowly, softly, like something that's waited too long to be heard. And for the first time, they stop running, not because they're brave, but because they're too tired to keep pretending. They sit with it, the ache, the loss, the truth. They start to realize it wasn't you who scared them. It was what you represented: closeness, safety, intimacy, things that required surrender. Something they never learned was safe. You offered warmth. They only knew cold. You offered understanding. They only knew survival. You offered connection. They only knew control. And now, without you, they're left holding both truths: the need to be loved and the fear of being seen. They begin to trace it back to the moments long before you, the places where love meant performance, where affection was conditional, where independence became armor. That's where their language of leaving began, long before you ever arrived. So now they sit with the weight of that, and something begins to shift. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's quiet. Healing always starts that way. It's in the moment they stop blaming you for triggering their wounds and start realizing you revealed them. It's in the moment they admit they pushed away love because they didn't know how to receive it. It's in the moment they whisper, I didn't want to lose you. I just didn't know how to stay. That truth breaks something open inside them, because for the first time, they're not defending the wound. They're acknowledging it. They start to feel emotions they used to suppress: guilt, sadness, regret, longing. But beneath all that, something else begins to flicker: compassion, not the kind they give others, but the kind they finally give themselves. Because now they see it. They weren't cruel. They were scared. They weren't heartless. They were hurting. And every time they ran, it wasn't rejection of love. It was self-preservation. But now that pattern is losing its power because they've met its origin. And you can't unsee the truth once you've seen it. They start showing up for themselves in small ways. They check in with their emotions. They breathe before reacting. They allow space for discomfort without escaping it. It's awkward at first, raw, foreign, but that's what healing feels like. Learning to stay in what once made you run. They start journaling, not to fix themselves, but to understand. They begin therapy, or maybe they just start talking, really talking, for the first time in years. They tell someone, I used to think I didn't need anyone, but maybe I just didn't know how to trust needing. And that honesty becomes a bridge, a fragile one, but real. They start catching themselves in patterns: the urge to pull away, the instinct to shut down, the voice that says, you're too much, or worse, they'll leave if you show this part. But this time, they don't obey it. They breathe through it. They stay present. They stay open. That's the quiet revolution inside the avoidant. The shift from reaction to awareness. They realize staying doesn't mean losing control. It means reclaiming it. Because control born from fear isn't control at all. It's just a prison. And when they finally start choosing connection, not out of need, but out of choice, they begin to experience something they've never known before: safety and closeness. They start rebuilding a relationship with love. But this time, love begins with them. They apologize to themselves for all the years they believed love was danger, for all the people they pushed away, for all the warmth they couldn't hold. And slowly, they begin to forgive themselves. That's how the avoidant learns to stay. Not because the fear disappears, but because they stop letting fear decide. Because love, real love, isn't found in safety. It's built in courage. And this time, they're finally ready to try. There's a quietness that comes after years of survival, a soft kind of peace that doesn't need to prove, perform, or protect. For the avoidant, that silence used to feel unbearable. Now it feels like home, because it's no longer the sound of emptiness. It's the sound of safety. They've stopped trying to control love. They've stopped trying to avoid it. They're learning how to receive it. It didn't happen overnight. It came through hundreds of small choices: to stay when they wanted to run, to speak when silence felt safer, to lean in when distance felt familiar. Every time they chose presence, their nervous system learned something new: that love isn't danger, that closeness can be safe, that vulnerability isn't exposure, it's connection. They start showing up differently. They listen. They respond instead of react. They say, I need space, without disappearing. They say, I'm scared, without pretending they're fine. And those words, the ones they never used before, become their new language of intimacy. You, the person who once felt like too much, now becomes the mirror they can finally look into, without shame, because they've stopped confusing love with loss. They've stopped believing that being seen means being controlled. They've started to understand that freedom and connection can coexist. They can love and still be themselves. They can stay and still feel free. That's the paradox that healing teaches them. That love doesn't cage you. It meets you where you are and gently walks beside you until you realize you were never trapped. They stop seeking intensity and start craving consistency. They stop chasing the high of detachment and start embracing the calm of understanding. The same peace they once called boring now feels like safety. They begin to see how chaos was never passion. It was survival dressed as excitement. And they begin to fall in love, not with the adrenaline of avoidance, but with the quiet rhythm of real connection. They learn to say, I love you, without flinching. They learn to let someone's hand stay in theirs, without pulling away. They learn to wake up next to warmth and not feel the urge to run. They learn that closeness doesn't take away their identity, it reveals it. Because love, when it's healthy, doesn't demand that you shrink. It invites you to expand. And the avoidant, for the first time, allows that expansion. They stop hiding behind control and start living inside connection. It's not perfect. There are days they still freeze, moments they still retreat into silence. But this time, they come back. And that's the difference. Because healing isn't about never leaving. It's about learning how to return. They learn to repair. They learn to say, I'm sorry. They learn to let love hold them in their most fragile states. And that's when the power dynamic shifts. They no longer feel powerless in love. They feel human. They begin to understand that true strength was never about detachment. It was about presence, the ability to stay, to feel, to trust, to be seen. That's real power. The kind of power that doesn't come from control, but from surrender. They finally start to experience love without losing themselves. And that's when they realize the story was never about avoiding love. It was about remembering how to receive it. They've spent so long loving absence because it felt predictable. Now, they're learning to love presence because it feels real. They start to rebuild life with new rules, to choose curiosity over defense, connection over control, and openness over pride. They begin to nurture the version of themselves they used to run from, the one that still wants to be held. And maybe one day, they look at you again, not with fear, but with recognition, because now they see that you were never asking for perfection. You were asking for presence, and now they're ready to give it. They may still flinch sometimes when love gets close. They may still pull back on instinct, but now they notice. Now they breathe. Now they choose again. Because the avoidant who once built walls is now learning to build bridges. And every bridge they build is a silent love letter to the parts of them that once believed connection was unsafe. They've stopped waiting for the right kind of love. They're learning to be it. Because love isn't found in the absence of fear. It's found in the courage to stay through it. And for the first time, they finally do. If this spoke to you, not just in your mind, but somewhere deep in your body, that quiet place that knows what it's like to run and still crave to be found, then you're not alone. You don't have to unlearn everything at once. You just have to start staying right here with yourself, because healing doesn't start when someone loves you differently. It starts when you do.